That particular clause that you're talking about, it's referred to as the Henry VIII clause for a reason. It gives the government massive amounts of power, and it's virtually unprecedented.
The CBC is despicable. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we got some terrible news, which we'll get to in a bit here because YouTube doesn't like that stuff in the first 35 seconds of a video. We also got Andrew Scheer going on CBC, breaking down the Conservatives' plan going forward here, trying to work with Mark Carney and get rid of all their draconian stuff in their bills they keep trying to slip under the rug, things to benefit Brookfield. Got some other stuff here. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we got Kirk posting this. Insolvencies in Canada are climbing, and in some areas, mortgage delinquencies are at a 10-year high. There are whole areas in Canada that mortgage values are above house value. Renewals will be a tough decision for many. Insolvent homeowners have $112,000 in unsecured debt. One market downturn and Canada would see a 2008 US equivalent of a market crash. This is right on point. This is a very scary thing. I used to do the trust accounting for my ex-wife's notary office. We used to do $10 to $12 million of sales through the office every month. I used to balance the numbers there, and I can tell you this is spot on. As Kirk said, we have a mortgage value that is above the house value. People have to decide, do they want to go bankrupt? Do they want to eat the loss? Or do they want to keep paying for a mortgage that's way more, in some cases, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 more than the value of the house? This is really destroying a lot of Canadian lives. You know, so many people trusted Trudeau back in the day, and it's coming back to bite a lot of Canadians.
Interest rates are at historic lows, Glenn.
Okay, but it's still a lot of money. No. It's still a lot of money.
Moving ahead, we've got Conservative Doug Shipley posting this. He forced the Liberal government to reveal that it spent at least $1.6 million in taxpayer money on legal fees to fight and delay access to information orders. This should be against the law. This should just be open to the public. There should be no access to information requests. It should just by default be available. Are we surprised? No, the Liberals are corrupt. Moving ahead, we've got more than half of British Columbians fear for their safety, survey suggests. Yeah, no kidding. There's certain areas of town, multiple towns I won't go to, I won't get out of the car in because they're dangerous. Canada has become dangerous under the Liberals. Moving ahead, we've got 10 people have been ended, including the suspect after a school pew-pew event in Tumbler Ridge, BC. I believe this is the third worst event like this in Canadian history. This is horrific. Hearts and prayers go out to the families. This is absolutely awful. What's also awful is what CBC is doing with this. Listen to this. As Melissa points out, holy crap, state-funded CBC can't hold back bringing up the United States in politics as this mass pew-pew event has unfolded in Tumbler Ridge.
The people involved directly and indirectly.
Yeah, I think about the United States where, first of all, they have a lot of school shootings. I mean, if you look proportionally at the fact they have 10 times the population that we do, they still have way more than 10 times the number of school shootings. But very quickly after each of those shootings, it devolves into partisan politics. I don't see that happening here. I don't, but you tell me in terms of how do you see the political reaction to this unfolding?
The irony of his statement there is not going to turn into partisan politics, and that's what they're turning this into. They're bringing up America. I mean, what's Mark Carney running on? Scary America, and they're just tying it right to it. What's next? They're going to say Trump-style politics made its way up to Tumbler Ridge, and that's why that happened? Right now, it is absolute confusion of who did this, but there's numerous people who live there who say they have information, and we've got Amy Ham here from the National Post, columnist, saying that two locals have identified the attacker's family and claimed that it was a trans-identified male son. He pew-pewed his mother and his brother before going to school and then ending 8 more people, and 25 people have been injured, 10 have perished, but she says this has not been confirmed by the police. Yukon Strong saying, I've been contacted by someone I grew up who lives nearby Tumbler Ridge. This is what they passed on. Grade 9 trans boy to girl. Parents were ended, school pew-pewed. This is just absolutely horrific. So obviously this is going to dominate the news cycle here. Instead of focusing on the victims and the families, what do we have CBC doing here? As Mario pointing out, the CBC couldn't help resist calling the town Trump instead of Tumbler. Just listen to it. They call it Trump Tumbler.
In fact, everybody in the town of Tumbler Ridge and beyond is being asked to shelter in place. I'm here along with Sarah Penton in Kelowna.
If she noticed she made the mistake, she should say it.
In the town of Tumbler Ridge and beyond. In the town of Tumbler Ridge and beyond.
In the town of Tumbler Ridge. What a bunch of bullcrap on here. We know what they're doing here. Now, we do have this. The police acted very quickly, which saved a bunch of lives.
The question, and I'll add that this is a small, tight-knit community with a small RCMP detachment as well, who responded in 2 minutes, no doubt saving lives today. And just to again thank the responding officers for their courage, for their dedication, their professionalism.
2 minutes. That's impressive. So some real heroes there stepped up to the plate and saved some lives. Initially, the whole trans aspect of this, I think, came from the police when, well, they said this.
That includes the deceased gun person.
Okay. And then
The deceased gun person. So obviously the police don't want to get wrapped up into all the politics of this. Jump over to CBC. We got Andrew Scheer breaking down the Conservatives' position on Mark Carney's new bills. They're basically getting them to cut out all the crap that they're trying to help Brookfield with, like being able to not be screened by conflict of interest, draconian stuff like that. So some stuff can get through and try to help Canadians. And they basically have a rule here. As long as it doesn't hurt Canadians, they're going to let the stuff pass.
What is your reaction to what Sean Fraser had to say? Because when the Justice Committee meeting got cancelled yesterday, it was billed as a sign of progress. Where are things?
Well, it's just a completely false characterization for Sean Fraser to say that. It's Liberals who have chosen to prioritize a bill that is divisive, that has divided Canadians and divided parliamentarians as well. We proposed 19 times in the fall to park C9 so that we could deal with bail reform. That's something that Canadians feel very strongly about. We don't believe the government's solution to bail reform goes far enough, but we said, well, at least it doesn't do any further harm. Let's pass that very quickly. It's the government that chose to keep C9. The same is true with their other crime legislation. It's Liberals who are choosing to use C9 as an obstruction measure against their own legislation.
My understanding, though, from what I heard yesterday, was that maybe this had gone to negotiations, perhaps with the House leaders, the Justice Minister or his proxies, and the critics on this portfolio, and that maybe some progress was being made, and the Bloc would have been in on this, too, because you're kind of on opposite sides with them a bit on this. Is that, in fact, the case? Are you moving towards something that can go to committee maybe as soon as tomorrow?
Well, it's already at committee, but maybe what I would say is that we are engaged in good faith conversations about what aspects of C9 are supportable. Protecting access to places of worship of all faiths, protecting sites that are connected to faith-based groups. Wide support for that. We don't believe anybody should be harassed or intimidated on their way to a temple, a synagogue, a mosque, or a church.
David Cochrane with, of course, what's happened for the past 2 years? These people are getting terrorized going to these places. And we're talking about a Pew Pew event. I mean, people in these places of worship have been targeted and lead has flown through those places too.
Areas where all the parties agree on, and there's more contentious issues that are blocking that, maybe we should focus on the common ground and get that passed quickly.
So you're talking about splitting the bill, and I appreciate, yes, it's at committee. I meant a compromise that could go to committee by tomorrow. Are we close to that, or are you insisting on the contentious bits being taken out and put into maybe a separate piece of legislation?
Well, at the risk of compromising good faith conversations, what I would say is that we made our position very clear. There are elements of the bill that are not offensive to most Canadians. There are elements of the bill that do not empower government to censor religious texts or religious speech. If the government has a willingness to work on that common ground, we would take that in good faith.
But are we close to seeing something on this by tomorrow? Because I appreciate the contentious issues. I mean, you have argued that this will criminalize certain religious scriptures and texts. The Bloc believes that the religious exemption is being used as a shield against hate speech, and there's some challenges in reconciling those. Do you think we will see some kind of a compromise put to committee tomorrow, or is it too soon to know?
Well, first I would say it's not just Conservatives saying that. The Liberal minister himself admitted that this would criminalize aspects of those faith-based texts. And there are existing laws.
When did he admit?
He came to committee and he said absolutely that. Mark Miller said that.
Parts of the Bible.
Yeah, that thing went viral on X. David Cochrane's trying to sweep this under the rug as usual.
It would be criminal, because Mark Miller's saying on social media that is not the case. So he's just saying,
I can show you the clip where he was at committee and he said absolutely that would be captured. Those are his words. I mean, I believe that was pretty well disseminated when he said it. And what I would say is there's lots of laws existing on the books right now that aren't being used by the government to prosecute hate speech, and the massive rise in things like anti-Semitism that we've seen, where streets are taken over for days and days at a time in some cases, and bricks thrown through daycares, in fact, shot up. There are lots of laws existing on the books that are not being used that could go into that. We don't believe that the answer is to add new laws that if I take the Mark Miller's own words, the intention would be to make some passages of religious texts illegal. Now, what I will say in terms of timelines, it's hard for me to assess the pace of that, but I will say that we've been, that we have been having good faith conversations to see if there's a way to prevent the Liberals from using C9 to block other pieces of legislation that we would say, hey, if this improves the judicial system, let's look for results.
Okay, so on the Budget Implementation Act, because this is going to be a big one, not that this one isn't serious, but this is unquestionably a confidence motion and needs to get passed before the end of March, I believe. Kate, who was just in the studio, had some reporting that there is a conversation happening between the Conservatives and the Liberals after the meeting with Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Kearney to maybe strip out some components of the Budget Implementation Act, including the bit to give ministers the power to exempt certain companies from certain non-criminal pieces of legislation if it helps with economic competitiveness. This is an issue that...
This guy's unbelievable. Non-criminal. Is really nothing going on there. Yeah, they want to make it so Brookfield isn't affected by conflict of interest because Mark Carney's wrapped up in them. If this is what Carney's able to get done in his first year with a minority government, this many conflicts of interest, which is the most comprehensive list in Canada of his conflicts of interest, which is no thanks to any of the media. It's just some guy on YouTube doing this. What will Mark Carney be able to achieve with a majority government? I mean, I haven't had time to fill in some of these. Manulife when he's over in China, BMO and ATCO, Cattle, this Chinese battery company. Like, I still have more work to do on this. There's so many conflicts of interest. These are not some little conflicts of interest like the Red Chris mine. Mark Carney named this project and he's invested in it. This should be highly against the law. He should be immediately thrown out of power and charged for this. But clearly what we've learned is our system is so unbelievably corrupt that the RCMP don't want to step in. They don't care. They'll just let this slide. And Mark Carney just ripping off taxpayers. With that said, listen to this exchange from Sandra Cobina, Conservative, with Mark Miller.
Why should one minister, individual minister, be allowed to bypass 150 years of Canadian law and exempt a person or company of their choosing?
Look, that may be your view, but I don't think that is what's happening.
Well, that's how it's written.
It doesn't say people are being exempted from 150 years of law.
It says from any federal law except the criminal code.
Right. There's no mention of years or...
It's any federal law except for the... So it's any federal law that has been passed over the last 150 years.
Right.
You can't get her, man. She is way too smart. Mark Miller thought he could do some cheeky little thing to shake this question. It's not working.
No, I'm not going to parse this out with you.
So just to be clear, you don't need it to do your job, but you want to keep it nonetheless.
I think it's helpful to have.
Do you see the potential of abuse, though, in that companies or people will have to lobby you personally and not care about the law itself?
No one's asked me to overturn any laws.
You would have the ability to.
In some context, perhaps. But again, this is something that would have to be used very judiciously.
Yeah, like we're going to trust these guys to respect the rule of law. They're going to let Brookfield run rampant with contracts is what they're going to do.
How could you possibly think that this would not undermine the trust in our democracy then?
I think Canadians expect us to act reasonably. I think Canadians expect us to be judicious in our decision making. Passing a law like C-15, which all members will have the opportunity to vote on, is something that is inherently accountable in and of itself.
Well, it has this particular clause that is very problematic. It is all over the news. I have a letter with 43 organizations asking for you to strike it because of the potential of abuse, but you still want to keep it.
I think I've answered that question about 3 times now.
I just don't find it reasonable for you to have the powers of a king, essentially.
I certainly don't have the powers of a king.
If you are allowed to exempt any entity from any federal law, it is like the powers of a king.
Is that a statement or a question?
Well, it's a fact.
Thank you, Ms. Cobina. That concludes the time.
Mark Miller, just unbelievable. This swindly little guy slithered his way up from the backbenches. Trudeau's rats are still around, despite the ship mostly sinking. It's still staying afloat somehow.
Where are things on that? Are you willing to compromise on the Budget Implementation Act if the government, in fact, accedes to this request? Where are things?
Well, what I would say is that that particular clause that you're talking about, it's referred to as the Henry VIII clause for a reason. It gives the government massive amounts of power, and it's virtually unprecedented. And what the Liberals are trying to do is give ministers the ability to circumvent several laws that no one else gets that kind of power to do. So what we've said is if they accept our compromises, and if we say to them, look, Let's build some scrutiny around that, some transparency. Let's make sure that Liberals don't get to do what they've always done. When Liberals believe that no one's looking, what do? They have the Green Slush Fund scandal where they line the pockets of wealthy, well-connected Liberal insiders. There are all kinds of examples of Liberals using tools to enrich their friends. We want to make sure that can't happen. So if they agree with us that they will modify or build better protections around that particular clause, then what we've said is that we would allow for a path for the budget bill to pass.
Okay, so
I mean, just think about this. If Brookfield is able to bypass all these laws and regulations, environmental regulations, all this kind of stuff, there's no way to keep track of this. I mean, I don't even have enough of them on here. I don't know how many Brookfield companies they own that are working with in partnership with on my chart here, but it's not 1,900 companies. That's too big of a task for me to handle here. Not unless I have another 10 years. We sure hope we don't have Mark Carney as prime minister for 10 years. I don't think he actually wants that. He only wants a majority for 4 years because, well, Mark Carney's carried interest, the 3% he gets off of this Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. We don't know the exact dates, but roughly we can ballpark it here. The first initial closing was July 2021, which is what we see here. Brookfield News, July 27th, 2021. Brookfield Asset Management, $7 billion closing of the GBTF Fund 1. This is the one that Mark Carney set up. And we know the final closing was June 2022, which is what we see here. Another $15 billion raised. June 22nd, 2022. Once again, total capital raise $15 billion, GBTF. So this is when Carney's fund ended. So it's somewhere in there, and then it's a 10-year fund, putting it at 2032. And if they extend it to 12 years, which is in the contract, then it could be 2034, which is why I have these different numbers here. So this timeline here, 2032 and 2034, what does that perfectly line up with? None other than Mark Carney's stock options in Brookfield. We know this from the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. So Mark Carney with his two sets of shares here, strike price $35 and $40. You can see the expiring date is 2033 and 2034. So he needs to boost everything before these dates, which lines up with the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. So really, that's his end date. He doesn't want to be there any longer. At maximum, he'd want to be in there 7 years.
We believe that it's our job as the official opposition to hold up a light, to scrutinize, and to propose solutions. We believe that they have tried for a massive overreach here. I mean, think about ministers just having the ability to circumvent duly passed legislation, regulations, all kinds of power. I don't believe Canadians want that. When you allow for a government to create an economy where the only companies, businesses, workers who get to succeed are those people who have special access to ministers, that creates terrible outcomes for everybody. We need to move quickly after 10 years of terrible Liberal policies that drove up costs and chased away investment, but we can't do it in a way where governments get incredible power without scrutiny. Every time that's been tried in every country that's been tried, it leads to corruption and terrible economic outcomes.
You got to wonder, why isn't the NDP or the Bloc pushing back against this stuff? It's like so draconian what they're trying to do here.
Policies driving up costs. Your central thesis has been that deficits have been a big factor in driving up the costs. This Budget Implementation Act would allow for an $80 billion plus deficit, depending on where...
This isn't a thesis. This is fact. This is what happens when you run big deficits. It increases inflation. That's not a thesis.
Where things go. I mean, how comfortable are you letting that go through? Because that's what the end result will be. Even if you do get this change, and I appreciate the points you've outlined on that, it is an $80 billion deficit budget that the Conservatives will be compromising on allowing it to go ahead.
Yeah, well, not to get too procedurally wonky, David, although maybe your viewers would have
give it a shot.
But the spending in budgets happen when the budget implementation, when the budget vote itself happens. There's a Ways and Means motion that happened back.
Fair point.
So that's already locked in.
Yeah, he's calling him on his bull crap here. David Cochrane just tried to corner Andrew Scheer and basically say, well, if you let this go through, then you're basically supporting an $80 billion deficit. Like, this is unbelievable. He should be calling out Carney for doing the $80 billion deficit, not that the Conservatives would be allowing this to go through. And as he just said, the Ways and Means motion, when they put that through in the first place, already gives them the money to do that. Remember, Mark Carney didn't even have a budget. They're able to get money without it. It's just that's never really happened before. Aside from in the times of election, you need a way to bridge over to the next budget or to the next government. But Mark Carney just decided to run the country with no budget for whatever that was, 6 months. So good on Andrew Scheer here calling out David Cochrane's crap.
This is legislative changes, some of which Conservatives have long been calling for. Some of which we don't agree with. You know, they're putting billions of dollars more into the Canada Infrastructure Bank. That's something that hasn't delivered results. But that's already, again, that's spending that's already been locked in. So if we can get some measures around transparency and accountability on what they're trying to do with this ministerial power overreach, then I'm optimistic that we can find a path forward.
Is this level of cooperation that you're offering, because it was very different before the break, for whatever reasons, is it just to avoid an election? The public opinion polling would suggest that they are ahead by a small amount or a large amount. The gap on leadership is quite large if you look at favorability ratings and all these sorts of things. And a lot of the analysis and even talk from people in your caucus is, we don't want an election. We're worried about an election, so let's not give them an excuse to call an election by being obstructionists in Parliament. And this is more self-defense and avoiding self-harm than it is cooperation.
Well, first of all, we make decisions based on principle, not politics. And secondly, I would say I don't agree with the characterization. If you look at since the election, we signaled right up front. We said, look, after 10 years of Liberal policies, carbon taxes, inflationary deficits, soft on crime policies that have drastically made our country less safe and more dependent on the U.S. economy, we need to get to the results phase. In the spring, we passed Bill C-5. That's what Mark Carney claimed that would allow him to build all kinds of new major projects. They haven't been able to get a single new project through that office, but we facilitated the passage of that bill. In the fall, we tried 19 times to park C-9 to deal with bail reform. Liberals only agreed on the 20th time. So if you look back at the last few months, we are consistently saying where a Liberal bill does no further harm, where they steal one of our ideas, or where Mark Carney is claiming that this will get the results that Canadians expect, we're saying, okay, well, we will let that pass, and Canadians can judge him on the results.
So it's not about a spring election at all. You're not worried about an election in a little bit.
David Cochrane is unbelievable, like just completely trying to smear the whole Conservative Party here. Obviously, there's politics going on here, but I mean, for someone who's supposed to be unbiased asking the questions, he really seems like he's a cheerleader for the Liberal Party.
We were working in good faith on legislation since the last election, and it's been very consistent with what my leader, Pierre Poilievre, said to the Prime Minister right after the election. It's consistent with the letter that he wrote the Prime Minister when the House of Commons returned. We've identified areas where, with a few, if they accept a few compromises to build in better protections for taxpayers and more protection on transparency and accountability, then we would allow for a path for that legislation to pass. So we've been very consistent.
So yeah, they have been very consistent. Mark Carney, he said, judge him on the price of groceries. He said he'll build things at unimaginable speeds, and none of that stuff has happened. And what does he want? He wants companies like Brookfield to be exempt from conflicts of interest, which is ridiculous. There has to be a way to convey how corrupt Mark Carney is, otherwise we will never be rid of these corrupt Liberals.